have to go get my peach cobbler.
Like it's like that old when I was growing up, we had like those old bars in the neighborhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had those cats would go and they sit all day at the counter. And I remember one guy I knew on the bar, he says, "This is what you call long money, right? That's that money that just comes and just stays, and they spend it slow, but they spend it long."
That's right.
Now, you'll have these other bars where, you get these cats come in, they'll drop $100 or drop $200, whether they drop, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
That's fast money.
Mm-hmm.
And that fast money burns fast and it's not sustainable. That's
Absolutely.
slow money where Mr. John gonna come in there every Wednesday and every Friday and every Tuesday.
Yeah.
He's gonna sit there and he's gonna have his, few cocktails before he heads out. That's that money that sustains that business, And so, the people come in, like we had one woman in Maplewood every Monday at the farmer's market. She shows up same time. She gets off the train, comes down, rushes because we're about to close. And we save her 3 sweet dark cherry cobbler.
And she comes pick some up.
She comes pick some up.
See,
You understand what I'm saying?
And things like that, when you think about businesses that have been able to sustain themselves for years off of customers like that, you're doing something that you really love to do.
Mm-hmm.
Your focus is, of course, everybody has to be able to financially sustain themselves, but it's a passion.
Yeah.
Because, that fast money, that's what it is. It's the money. I want to get the money. I got to get the money real fast. How do I get this money? And then you get it. Now you on to your next thing.
Yeah.
But the staying power is the passion.
Just sit back.
That's
I say 2 things are required: passion and habit. But habit is more important because passion, when it wanes, habit will sustain you.
Yes.
And so there are times where, like, I'm passionate about what it is I'm doing, and sometimes my passion is over 100%. Like, it's just through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are times where, part of me says, man, not today.
Mm-hmm.
But then the habit says, yeah, today.
And
Because I got to get up.
Yeah, the habit is created by consistency.
There you go.
Consistency creates.
Mm-hmm. And you got to have it.
Sustainability.
Yep, you got to have it. And people with bad habits, what the end result's going to be. You got to have good. I get up before my alarm clock every day. You know what I mean? Every day. And then, sometimes my partner says, Eric, get up. I say, even on a if I didn't have to open up the shop, I still get up the same time. I go down, the same routine. Go down, make my coffee, and I sit there. I said, "What are you doing?"
Which is first let me introduce you. Okay, we're gonna start this podcast, guys. Before we get any deeper, because I had a really great comeback for that, and I'm definitely gonna get to that. Right? We have Mr. Eric Dawson with us. Eric is the North New Jersey native and founder and CEO of Grandma Emma's Corp. It's a company that you founded.
Yes.
When you started baking and your grandma's peach cobbler recipe.
That's absolutely right. Yep.
Right? And you started baking when you were in recovery or in the midst of.
I was in the storm.
You was in the storm.
I was in the storm.
The stage.
I think I started baking stage 3 stomach cancer. And I think I probably was in my 4th round of chemo, and I went through a total of 16 rounds. So around my 4th round of chemo is when I started searching for, with the advice of my therapist at Sloan Kettering. She said, Eric, you got to find a distraction, because I was slipping into some deep depression, just trying to close off, these different pieces, these chambers. It was, it was like compartmentalizing, Dawn, because when you experience trauma, right, in order to deal with the trauma, sometimes you want to just close off doors so you don't have to deal with it. And I could feel these doors like physically closing off. I think maybe in my whole life, I was on one medication. All of a sudden, I look up and on my windowsill, I had 9 different medications. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like, and all this stuff was happening. So she said, you got to find something. And so in talking about my grandmother and talking about my background and, as therapists do, she's every time we talk about my grandmother, she see my face light up. And she said, look, why don't you do something that pays homage to your grandmother? And I said, my grandmother used to bake my cobbler for me, and she used to bake cakes and stuff. She said, well, do some of that. And then the aromatherapy and such. And so I started baking a cobbler, and the rest is true.
But before I introduced you, you were saying how you get up at the same time.
Yeah.
Which you're one of the strongest people I know. I mean that, I've seen you. I have been in your house. I couldn't believe that you were sitting with me. I was like, where does he find the energy and the strength to do this? Where?
You know what? And so this is, take it how you want to take it, religious, spiritual, however. But there's some truth to where it says, and in the Bible it says, there's a peace that surpasses all understanding. There's also a strength that surpasses all understanding. And when you submit and when you realize that in the end, you don't control a lot, and you just say, you know what? I'm going to be what I'm meant to be. And just let that sit right there. Everything you need is inside of you. But I believe that. But you block off those blessings or access to that because you try to intervene as opposed to just letting it flow. Mm-hmm. You understand? And so I just let it flow. And these things happen, right? And I find the strength. It comes. I believe it. And so I wake up because I know that I'm going to have every single thing that I need to get through today. I just need to show up. And so I show up.
Your case is not as easy said than done. It's when I get emotional when I think about it. Like when I first came to see you and you just come out surgery, mm-hmm. stomach surgery, and we talking and working, and I'm like, how does this man do it? And to see what you've done so far, mm-hmm. To see what you've accomplished. You're showing up at being a vendor. You're in the bakery. You're baking
7 days a week. Yeah.
You're doing all this. You have no limitations. You're not allowing this to restrict you, to limit you, to handicap you.
The universe, and I believe this too. We're all connected. In Buddhism, it talks about that. The fact that we are all connected and we all need each other to be who we're destined to be. And if you look through the history of your life, you'll see people or things that have occurred that have led you to the sum total of who you currently are. And so I look at it and it's I can see it. I'm like Neo in the Matrix, where he finally could see the code. Mm-hmm. I see it in a way that is just astonishing to me, which just makes me thirst to be available to see more. So my dad,
tell people who your dad is.
Oh, I'm sorry. My dad was Carl Sharif. He was, some people say a political architect mm-hmm. in the state of New Jersey, concentrating mainly in Essex County and more specifically in the greater Newark area. But he was diagnosed with soft tissue sarcoma now 25 years ago. And I know that because his diagnosis came on the birthday of my third oldest daughter. And so I was in the hospital with my ex-wife dealing with that. And I get a phone call from my sister saying that, my father was diagnosed with cancer. But I couldn't do anything until I got out of the hospital. But he battled 16 years with soft tissue sarcoma. And ultimately did not succumb to that, but some other illness. But I watched my dad with incredible strength deal with his cancer journey. And he would go in the hospital and they'd have to, at one point, the tumor had grown to the size of a grapefruit. So they had to cut him open 10 inches. They took it out. The next time they cut him this way and took it out. Another time they cut him again. And each time, at good speed, he was out of the hospital and he was walking around again. And I said, oh my gosh, and never complain and never to just getting back to work, just getting back to work. But then my grandmother, his mom, my grandma Emma, was the same way. She just worked. She just worked. She just did what was required. My other grandmother, my mom's mom, when both my grandparents died mothers died at 99. My grandma Crawford, I just saw her work and just work. So I come from a family where there is no complaining. You just put in the work. And so those ingredients, along with all of the other experiences that I had, says, hey, Eric, just show up. Prepare yourself and show up.
Can you tell our audience who are not familiar with your journey, the type of cancer that you had and the surgery that you had to go?
Yeah. So it was stage 3 stomach cancer. And so I got to say this. Black men, Black folks in particular, everybody should go get checked up and checked out. Black people, though, because of our history with medicine, the medical field, doctors, and how we've been treated, whether it was the Tuskegee experiments and, all the other things that we've encountered, we are reluctant to go to doctors. We don't have a trust for them. And so my journey with cancer started before I knew I had cancer, but I knew something was wrong with me gone, and I didn't go and get it checked out. I used to be 210 pounds. I'm now 153, but I had dropped all the way down to 148 or something like that and never went to a doctor. And I was losing weight, and I would just take my belt and punch another hole in my belt to singe my pants together and make them fit. And I looked like Tom Hanks in Big with my clothes. They were that huge on me. And I couldn't eat. I couldn't swallow anything. I could barely swallow water. I had to liquefy my oatmeal to get it down. No solid foods. I was regurgitating. This was all happening over months before I went to the hospital. I was passing out. And then finally, I would walk to go see my mom. I'd get to the sidewalk, and there was stairs going up to get to the door to ring the doorbell, maybe 7 steps. I'd walk up those 7 steps, and I'd have to take a nap on the porch. That's how tired I would get. And I still didn't go to the hospital or to the doctor. And then finally, I went to go get my registration renewed at the DMV on Central Avenue in East Orange. And I'm standing in line and feeling I'm about to keel over. And I asked the guy in front of me, I said, can you hold my spot? I need to sit down. And so I did. And then when I was next, they were literally shaking me to wake me up. I was in such a deep sleep. And so I get up and I stumble to the counter, and I'm leaning over the counter, barely able to stay conscious. And the lady looks at me, she says, sir, how'd you get here? I said, I drove. She said, I'm not letting you drive. And I said, I just want to take care of my registration. She said, sir, you got to call somebody. I'm not going to let you drive out of here. So I called my then fiance, who passed away from breast cancer in September. But I called her. She came, got me, took me to St. Barnabas, had to wheel me in to the emergency room. I could not walk.
Before you decided to go to the doctor.
But this is what I'm saying. Do you know how many, I'm telling you, and your listeners, your viewers, I bet you they can point out several people in their family or in their circle of friends who have had some issues and said, oh yeah, I'm just going to go take a nap, or I'm just going to do this, or I'm going to have a little ginger ale because I think I got a little indigestion, I got whatever, instead of calling the doctor.
True.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, ma'am.
Were you scared?
No.
You weren't scared
No.
of what your father and the history of your family?
Was not scared. Even when we got there, and I told Terry, that was my fiance, I said, Terry, I got cancer. When we wheeled it. Because at that point I knew something. I knew it had to be. And so they checked my hemoglobin, and it was below 7. And the doctor said, I don't know how you're conscious. And then they said, so you've got some bleeding somewhere. So then they did the necessary tests and everything. And it came back and they said, you have a tumor. No tears, no nothing. No, why me? It was a call. I called my mother. I told her I was in the hospital. I said, I got cancer. She said, I'm on my way up. My brother. Called my kids. One was in LA. The other one was in Philly. Daddy, I'm on my way. I'm getting a red eye. No, you're not. I said, "You go to work. What are you gonna do?" Like literally, when I tell you, no, nothing, and I can't explain it. It was just, and we went through the medical stuff they had to do, the endoscopy and everything, just to be able to stage it and to figure out whatever. And then the doctor came in and he said, "Eric," he said, "we're gonna work toward a cure." And I said, "Okay, tell me what I need to do." And he told me what I needed to do. And then I became laser focused. That was it. And so, and now, I've had, and it's almost out of body because I can tell you, like, oh yeah, 16 rounds of chemo, I do this, or, but like I said, I had to block a lot of that stuff out in order to manage it. And the reality of it all comes in when other people read my story. And then I see the expression on their face.
Yeah,
I realize how
it's amazing.
I realize how like serious it was. Do you understand what I'm saying? But I'm telling you,
didn't even tell them what they did to you.
Oh yeah, so I had a complete removal of my stomach, and then even me saying that, right? I'm gonna be very honest. Even me saying that, like I don't think I fully embrace it. Like I can tell you,
that's how you
but I'm disconnected with it in some senses, right? But I had a complete removal of my stomach, removal of my spleen. They had to remove a portion of my esophagus, right? So they had to do all of that. Yeah. And so I was in Highland Park doing a farmer's market. And this woman comes up, and we have a placard that sits on a table at the farmer's market that tells this whole story. And the woman just started crying. Right now, I've had people come and read it and want to pray with me and hug me. And I had a woman in Ramsey who got out of her bed. She's got brain cancer. And she came because she was going to commit suicide. But she saw on an Instagram post me talking about something. And she said, "I got to meet that guy." Right? So these kinds of things have been happening. But this particular woman in Highland Park, she's crying. And she said, "Can I give you a hug?" So I went around the corner and gave her a hug. She said, "I want to hug you." She said, "Because I'm a nurse in oncology." She said, "And we deal with patients all the time." She said, "And we call this a Whipple." And I never looked up what that is. But she said, "That's what they call it." She said, "And we encourage patients through their treatment." She said, "But we have never seen someone survive that." And she said, "And so I'm looking at you." And she said, "Do you realize what a miracle you are?" She said, "I want to go back and tell all of the patients in the hospital, as well as my colleagues, that I met somebody who survived this." Now, that was probably one of the more grounding experiences, because then I said, "Oh my God." And it wasn't even me. It was like, wow, he went through something. That's how disconnected you understand? Like in my head, I'm like, man.
Eric, you went
because
through
for me, I'm like,
you're going through something.
Yeah,
you're still going through something, and you're showing up
every day.
Every day. You're still in the midst of you're going through
every day. Healthy, like digestion issues. Not being able to see. I eat something, and sometimes I'll be. When I say okay, it's relative. It's my okay, right? My new okay. But then other days I'll eat stuff and I can't keep it down, and I'm cramping and I'm doubled over, and they call it dumping, the dumping syndrome. And I go through that, and that thing can last 2-3 hours of me being in excruciating pain in the fetal position on the ground. But I don't talk about those things because they don't define me. They are real and true in terms of being a part of my life, but they don't define me.
I know, but I mean, I can just see you doing that. I remember you telling me once when I came to the bakery to sit with you, and you had to remind yourself to eat.
Yes.
Because you're not hungry. So, but if you don't eat, you'll pass the heck out. Yeah. But you are a pass out on the floor, get up and continue working.
That's it.
Oh, what happened? Oh, let me eat. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's amazing the strength that you have and what you endure and how you get through and all that you have accomplished. You opened up the bakery. Now you've done other things before that. We ain't even talking about before the cancer. Yeah. So we're not even talking about that, Eric. Right. We're talking about this, Eric. Yeah. During this storm, you've opened up businesses. You just had a opening yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're in ShopRite with your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just building this brand. You're building this legacy that you're going to leave behind.
Time. So again, spiritual, religious, however you want to look at it, there are rebirths. When people say born again, there are rebirths. And I experienced a rebirth. I see things differently, completely differently. My value system is completely different than it used to be. My love for my family, my friends, Black people, is stronger, and there's a greater commitment. And the idea of building legacy is important to me, right? I said to a friend of mine yesterday, I said, man, when I'm no longer here, Ito, the guy who did the cake for me, I said, when I'm not here, man, I said, if you go to my funeral, I said, I want to know, like, I want to live what I want you to say. Do you understand what I mean? Like, so I won't hear what you say because I'll be dead, but I'll know what you're gonna say by how I'm living.
Absolutely.
And so for me to know that my children, as they sit there at my funeral, that they'll be proud and not embarrassed or ashamed, because and I can do that. I can be purposeful about ensuring that. And so that's what it's about for me. Like my grandmother, like I know, because my grandmother poured into all of us. She didn't finish the 6th grade, and she wasn't a prolific reader at that time. She became one. Her mom died. She had to be a part of raising her siblings, right? But she taught me how to read because she understood the value of education. Mm-hmm. My grandmother who endured that, my grandfather who worked a jackhammer most of his life, raised amazing kids. My uncle was the first Black vice president of American Express. These are all people coming out of Rose Street in Newark. Mm-hmm. She also raised my dad, who was president of the Board of Education. He was the highest ranking Muslim in political office in the entire country. Sat on President Jimmy Carter's educational council. This is what my grandmother did. You understand? So she was about building legacy. And I think if I could talk to her now, because she used to say this to me. I would go out to play and she'd say, Eric, when you go out there, don't embarrass me. She said, you represent me. You carry my name. Do you understand? And so I still live by those things. She used to also tell me, Eric, don't be common. I was 10 years old and she told me that. She said, don't be common.
I like that.
And I didn't understand what that meant.
I know, until you become an adult.
Right, I had to grow into those shoes. Do you understand what I'm saying? But she was sowing seeds all that time, right? And so now I see, at 62 now, I see the fruit from the tree that those seeds started.
Your tree sprouted some great fruit.
Yes. And so now my children.
Absolutely.
Right? My daughter, my second oldest daughter, who's named after my grandmother. This is another funny story. I thought that I named Lucy, well, her name wasn't Lucy when she was born. Her name was Emma Simone Dawson, because my grandma Emma. And I didn't know, because everybody called my grandmother Emma, so I didn't know her first name was Lucy. I thought my grandmother's name was Emma Dawson, right? And so I named my daughter Emma, and then I love Nina Simone. So I gave her the middle name Simone, so she was Emma Simone Dawson. So as she was growing up, I said, I named you after your great grandma. And, my grandma Emma was alive at the time, so she could see her. And then when my grandma passed away, went to the funeral, we had the program, and we're sitting there, and my daughter, who now is in like the 6th grade, I think, Lucy was in the 5th or 6th grade, she's elbowing me. And I said, what? She goes, you said you named me after great grandma. This is at the funeral. Mm-hmm. I said, I did. So she goes, her name is Lucy Emma Dawson. I'm Emma Simone Dawson. I said, Lucy, not now. Emma, not now. So at the end, she's still pouting. We're at the repast. She's still pouting. She says to her mom, and she says, I want to change my name.
Oh.
We hired a lawyer. $300 later, her name was Lucy Emma Dawson.
Oh.
And that kid honored her great grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
So when I sent her off to school, to college, I told her, both my daughters, I gave them pictures of my grandmother, and I said, when you want to go party, when you think you're too tired to study, remember whose shoulders you stand on.
Mm.
See, she didn't have the opportunity, but she sowed the seed so we could. Next Friday, Lucy Emma Dawson is graduating from Howard School of Medicine. Dr. Lucy Emma Dawson. That's legacy. So now I look at how my grandmother poured into me, comforted me, guided me, instructed me, told me that I belonged to her. Don't go out there and embarrass her, Dawn. And so now here I am with a bake shop in Maplewood, where when she was in Newark, they wouldn't allow her up there. Come on.
I know,
See,
right?
let's keep it real.
Let's keep it 100.
Right? Her name is now
absolutely
on
right.
that building.
Mm-hmm.
And her great-granddaughter is a doctor. So I see the building block. And so I just keep going.
That's just amazing. I mean, I believe in very spiritual, right? And I've learned that I have a connection with my mom who has passed away. And I believe that I bet your grandma, biggest smile on her face, her heart is full up there.
Oh, she used the word chuckling. She'd be chuckling
I
right
know
now.
she's chuckling right now.
And she said, what? They ain't my Cobbler there? They buying it?
And my
Shucks, they
neighbor-
could come here and get it from me for free. She said, I'd pay it for them if they want. That would be her. She was saying, you got it in where? You selling it where? And she was so humble. There was such humility that just poured, that oozed from her, that to see it as a business with her name on labels and stuff, get out of it.
But the pride.
Yeah. So she to know that lessons taught were lessons learned, and that as a result, there is now a path for building generational wealth. And I'm not just talking about monetary wealth. I'm talking about a sense of who you see, which is why we as Black people are at such a deficit, because the greatest thing that they did, or the greatest tragedy that they enacted on us, was stripping us of knowing who we are. So we're not anchored. So when they say, you have immigrants who come here from other places and they're able to advance and do some things, it's because they're anchored in who they are. So they don't have to go through that journey of trying to figure out who they are, because they've been assimilated into some culture that is foreign to them and they don't know anything about. They know exactly that they're Ecuadorian, they know if they're Colombian, they know if they're whatever, and they have a culture that they can tie into, and that is their strength. We don't have that. And so each of us has to rebuild it in our own families, right? And if we're fortunate enough to be able to sustain that and build it, you see the strength in your family now. Right? They're now anchored to something. And so my grandmother would be most proud to see that, okay, I can see that this next generation, like the next generation of my family is phenomenal.
I know.
I mean, this generation, we got lawyers, we got doctors now, we got all kinds of, this next generation. I mean, I see I have a grandson and a granddaughter. But the other, and my brothers have grandchildren, and we're looking at the accelerated rate with which they are grasping things and understanding who they are, and then moving from that point with strength and confidence. And yeah.
Who do you think is going to, who you leave Grandma Emma's? Who's going to run Grandma Emma's?
So I don't know. So, none of my children are part of it. and that's okay, right? Because it's for them to figure out their own path. This is my path. This is my mural that I'm painting on the world. I have a business partner who legally possesses a percentage of the company. I have a will, I have all of that legal stuff in place. So they're beneficiaries. And they'll make a decision, at the time that, I expire, how, if they want to continue, but I'm continuing to try to lay tracks to have it be a sustainable enterprise, so the most recent thing that I'm doing. But one of the things that I wanted to do early on, and we're going to get back to it, Sloan Kettering, because of how they saved my life. I wanted to get back in a really big way. So I contacted them 2 years ago and said, look, I would love to use the product because my dad was treated as Sloan. He had soft tissue sarcoma. I was treated as Sloan. My grandmother wasn't treated as Sloan, but she had breast cancer. My uncle Clyde died of liver cancer. So, we got, stuff. And so I said, how can I use this brand to create greater awareness to gastric cancer as well as breast cancer? My sister just passed away December 24th, breast cancer. So I said, how can I use this? And so they said, we would love to figure out a way to partner. So I said, well, I got an idea. And I pitched it to them and they were down for it. I just didn't have the resources, human resources, to be able to bring it to fruition. But we were going to co-brand packaging and then build a back into the website where you could go and you could order online. And if you ordered from that site, that portal, proceeds would go to Sloan Kettering, right? Okay. And so I'm going to revisit that with them, and we're going to make that happen. And so that, again, will just be another way that, Grandma Emma's impacts, addresses real world issues and impacts everyday lives. And so then the second thing, 2 years ago, I was introduced to a gentleman who provides permanent housing for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And he approached me saying, listen, how would you like to create he said, I want to create a job training program, and I would love to have Grandma Emma's be a vehicle through which, these folks could be trained with real skills to be employable out in the workforce. So I thought that was a great idea. And that's how Grandma Emma's Bake Shop wound up in Maplewood on Springfield Avenue. So we're in partnership with an organization where we will be providing training. We'll teach them how to, how to properly weigh things. We'll teach them how to package our products. We'll teach them how to bake our products. We'll teach them, all of the aspects that they're able, to master, right? And focusing on their abilities as opposed to their disabilities. And so I'm eagerly waiting for that thing to kick off, because as I've been doing research on, there's an 83% higher unemployment rate within that community of adults with disabilities. And so there is a need, right? And so if I could use this brand to address that need, to bring greater awareness to it, then that'd just be something else that I was able to accomplish, right? So, and so it goes beyond Cobbler, right? It's beyond all those things. It's a vehicle through which we can accomplish a lot of stuff, and at the same time offer a tasty treat to people. Right?
Yes.
So
it is delicious. And the sweet potato pie. OMG. I was like, I had to go to bed. It's like 2:00 in the morning. I'm working and eating sweet potato pie. I'm falling asleep with it. I'm like, girl, that pie was good.
Yes, my grandma's recipe. So those buttermilk biscuits are her recipe. The sweet potato cornbread, the sweet potato pie, the cobblers are hers, and there are a couple other things. Oh, she called it a lemon light pie. and only a couple people in my family knew how to make it. I know how to make it. We're going to introduce that in the next couple of weeks up there in Maplewood. We got a lot of stuff.
And you also have the on Union Avenue.
Oh,
It's not a deli.
It's
a cafe.
It's a grab and go cafe. But this is how God works. Or the universe. Or again, whatever, however you want to define it. I never thought about being in a food business. I worked in corporate America for 30-some years as a business development specialist, as a chief marketing officer, creative director, did all those different things. And then the cancer just kind of flipped all of that upside down. And then after we launched Grandma, and it was during the height of the pandemic, nonetheless, right? And so all these things, you'll see where all the puzzle pieces are fitting in. Where the bake shop is in Maplewood, we started the farmer's market right there on that corner.
Yeah, I remember the farmer's market.
That's right. That's where we started during the height of the pandemic. So the universe brought us full circle back to where we started, right? But when we had become successful at the farmers markets, on these, containers of Cobbler, I bought a food trailer. And then we started doing festivals and things with the food trailer, and, people were exposed to the product. They loved it. And then me wanting to give, I invited my cousin to work on a food trailer with me, because he made food. All I did was the cobbler on the food trailer, but he was making hot dogs and all these other kinds of things down by Woodward Park. And that didn't work out. He went back to doing his food cart downtown Newark. And my friend said, Eric, you're not a cook. Why don't you do food on the thing? And then I realized, I said, see, just like in corporate America, where I was given the blessings that the universe had given to me, I was giving them to other people. I was giving that blessing to him. And I said, so, okay, let me start making my own food. And people were lining up at the food trailer. And so I was like, oh gosh, look at this. And then a friend of mine calls me up. He says, Eric, I got a buddy who owns a building up at 50 Union Avenue in Irvington. They're looking for somebody to operate that cafe area up there. So I said, I never thought about that. But that all came about because I was ready to receive my blessings.
Yeah.
Right? So I went up there, and now, by everybody's account, that is the most successful cafe that has been there in 20-some years. And we have almost a 5-star rating on Google over a 2-year period. And people love it. And so, Dawn, I think that the key for me is I know who I am. I accept it. And so that authenticity is what people see. So I don't have to, if I see you tomorrow, I'm going to be the same person I am right now. And I'm open to correction. So the people who know me, they say, Eric, you did this thing. And I'm quick to apologize. I'm quick to correct myself, right? A lot of introspection. And I think that is the thing. So there's no shorts with me, no nonsense with me. I say all I got is my word.
Yeah, but we used to have a lot of controversy now. The Eric Dawson.
Yeah, well, but you know what? No, but I was still me. I was still me.
You,
I was still me. People didn't like that me, and I still am, right? But what they say, you catch more flies with honey.
But this was before.
Well, it was in a transition. So no, I was doing the show.
I didn't realize that.
No. I was doing the show while I was getting chemo.
You what?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because there were a couple times where I was out of it. I couldn't make the show, and I called Kevin or I called Sydney, and they did
doing it with Kevin.
Yeah, and they did the show for me because I just didn't have the strength. But I am passionate, and I am passionate about my people. And this is what I'll say, right? Because I am a student of Dr. King. And a student of Malcolm. Dr. King was despised by Black folks. Like right now, there's this like rewriting of history where they paint Dr. King as a person who all Black people adored and loved, and that wasn't true. There were rifts in the church. There were rifts in the community. People thought that he was stirring the pot. He said, let things lay, leave it alone. The same thing with Malcolm. There are truths. And sometimes telling those truths ruffle feathers.
Mm-hmm.
But doesn't mean it's not the truth.
Sure doesn't.
And here's what I'll say. If you look through history, and this is one thing that we used to say on the Eric Dawson Radio Show, when you're speaking truth, you could always tell who's speaking truth because the establishment has a formula to reject truth speakers. And the formula is to radicalize you, to demonize you, and to criminalize you. So as soon as somebody starts speaking truth, meaning they're about to expose or they're working to expose the structure, right? The establishment, that establishment knows how to deal with them. They radicalize, demonize, criminalize. And if none of those things work, they assassinate you. So if you go through history, take that formula I just gave you, go through history and see all the people who've been assassinated.
I see it. I already.
As a result of that, right?
I see it. I see it when it happens.
Yeah.
You can see when someone's in the midst of these things.
Yeah.
Especially if you have knowledge, it's like I know exactly what's going on right now. Some
That's
people
absolutely
don't
right.
know.
That's absolutely
And
right.
then they fall for the banana in the tailpipe.
That's absolutely right.
Right? So those are the ones that you can convince so that you can do those things to that person.
Yes.
But when you're knowledgeable, it's not as simple.
And so I had death threats. I had people come to the studio. I had security outside my house. And so I took stock in some of that. And I said exactly what I just told you. I said, when you're speaking, when you are, when I was doing the Eric Dawson Radio Show, right, out of a little basement radio station in Orange, New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
I had people from the governor's office calling.
Mm-hmm.
I had people from the Capitol, congressmen or people from their offices, representatives calling me, asking me not to discuss certain things. I had folks from various mayor's offices, county executive offices. I had these people calling me, asking me not to discuss certain things.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about stuff that is getting close to the issue, the system will respond. So I always tell people, here's your litmus test. If the elected officials or those who are running for office, if they're not being threatened, they're not threatening. See, and what we need in order to have progress is we need elected officials or leaders who are threatening to the system. But you can tell when they're threatening to the system because they will be threatened. And that's just a fact. And so that's where you saw, it was, boy, man, those, in those threads, man, I was taking hits. Listen, and before, so here's the funny thing. I didn't start that to do any of that. I started, and actually, I think it still says on the Facebook page, it used to say Newark Citizen. And I was sitting in my dad's office one day. My brother was councilman of Central Ward in Newark. This is in 2010. Cory Booker, I think Donald Payne, the late Donald Payne Sr., had vacated the council seat and had gone
to the legislature?
Gone to Congress. I believe, is that it? 2010.
Yeah, that's where he was when he passed away, right?
Right. Because Donald Payne Jr. went what year? Or was it Donald Payne Jr. who left in 2010? No, because Donald Payne Jr. wasn't there for 15 years, was he?
No, did he take his father's seat?
Yeah, he took his father's seat. But anyway, whatever happened, that seat vacated. And Cory Booker wanted to seat the current Assemblywoman, Shanique Spates, wanted to put her in that seat. And the other council people protested that. They said we should have a vote, right? The council should vote for that seat. The mayor shouldn't be able to just appoint somebody to sit in that seat. And so they came, a couple of council people came up to in Irvington, talked to my dad to try to figure out what to do. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, you guys are all council people. Some of you have been doing this for decades in politics. And you haven't created a platform that allows you to quickly mobilize people around a crisis. So I literally got up, I went into the back room and I created a Facebook page called Newark Citizen, right? And then I just started blasting Corey about that. And I just was saying, be fair to the people and this and the other. And then folks started coming on the page and I got more and more folks. And so I'm like, okay. So I used that as almost like a water cooler, like place to go to have conversation, and left it open to everybody. And because I wasn't on a side, I was addressing an issue, and whoever fell on whatever side, let's talk about the issue. Mm-hmm. People came, and then it just exploded, and it became the biggest thing in Newark at one point.
Because you have a voice. Your family is part of that Newark.
That what they call Newark royalty. Yes. And I tell people, I grew up in Newark, but I grew up very privileged. I grew up, had congressmen, senators, governors come to the house.
Dave's, Tuckers, the Barackers, the
Cheney Fields. Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just
the Rices. Yeah, it was like a...
But did your dad... Because I know your dad changed his name.
He was called Dawson.
Mm-hmm. So I know he changed it to Carl Sharif.
And in fact, I met a guy when we had our soft opening for the bake shop a couple Saturdays ago. Victor Luca, who used to be in the East Ward. He was in politics in the East Ward in Newark, and then he became the mayor in Maplewood. Now he's a councilman in Maplewood. He came in. Somebody said to me, Eric, the councilman is here, wanted to say, come over and say hi to him. So I say, hi, my name is Eric Dawson. He said, Dawson? He said, another Dawson. I said, you know any Dawsons? He said, yeah. He said, a good friend of mine, Carl Dawson. I said, that was my dad, Carl Sharif. And it turns out that Victor Luca and I, there was a Board of Education election when the board went from being an appointed board. My father fought by creating an organization called People United for Better Schools. This is back in like '83. Oh my God. And he created this organization, and we got these 3 people elected, Brown, Stecker, and Brown, and they wouldn't seat them, right? Because the establishment was so corrupt that they said, no, we're not going to seat them. We're going to continue down the path that we're going to. So we held protests in what used to be a park across the street from City Hall. Now it's a building, and there's a house of pancakes in here and something else. But that used to be a park right there in the corner. And so we pitched tents, and we stayed for like a week. And they called me the mayor of Tent City at the time. And Victor Luca was down there. And so I hadn't seen him since then. And so we were reminiscing about those good times. But yeah, so so what they were most, the establishment was most concerned about was that I wasn't asking for anything. See, because when you ask for something, then you can be controlled. So I wasn't asking for anything. I was just willing to give all the information that I had. So, and I was careful about stuff, but I used to talk about on the show. I said, look, I sat in rooms where brown bags of cash were handed to people. I was in those rooms. So like you hear about it, I saw it. And then I would get calls when I would say it on the radio, don't mention any names, Eric. But I saw these things. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I can speak a very plain language without ever, like, attacking an individual. Just like I said to you, take every single elected official that says that they're fighting to improve the lives of the folks who are underserved. Well, there's a system that is actively working to keep that underserved community underserved. Actively. if you were really pushing against it, that system would push back against you. So if you're able to live comfortably in politics for 20 years and 30 years, that means that you're not pushing against that system. That's just fact. Now you want to, so now what happens is those people then dispatch, right, their surrogates to come and attack me.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because their surrogates are benefiting personally.
Mm-hmm.
Through a direct job they got because their friend got hired or something like that, right? So they're not concerned about the community at large that's underserved. They're concerned about their personal jobs, right? And so because that dynamic exists, they know, the elected official knows, I call these 5 people, and these 5 people are going to be on Eric's ass because they don't want to lose their job. They know they want to keep me in office, right? And that is the dynamic. And that's why on the show, we used to refer to them as slave catchers and Negro whisperers and tie it very closely to what used to happen on the plantation, because there was no difference, right? When you had Negroes who were seeking to be free, right? And you had one in particular who might have a lot of knowledge, the master would do what? Would take him, put him on a post, publicly whip him to show the others, this is what happens when you think that you're too uppity, when you think you're too smart, when you think you're too whatever. And so that they we have adopted those methods of those owners of behaviors of those former owners of enslaved Africans. And so that's how we operate. So even within our own circles, we don't know. We sit in rooms sometimes, and then you have somebody in there who's literally going to get up and go and tell somebody that they had a meeting and they were talking about this and the other and whatever. So, but it wasn't about me trying to tear people down. It was about me holding people accountable, and it was about me trying to uplift the community, educate the community in ways that I know, for instance, I know that the political establishment, in as much as you hear them talking in terms of national politics about voter suppression and voter intimidation, voter suppression and voter intimidation occurs in our communities every single day, right? Black on black voter suppression, black on black voter intimidation every single day. When we used to work, listen, how do you not call it voter suppression when you have campaigns by some of the wealthiest politicians around tearing down posters of somebody who's just trying to see if they could run for office? So I got $2 nickels to rub together. I just got enough money to go to Staples to get a couple flyers printed up. I want to hang them up. And you want to tear them down because you don't want people to know that I'm running. Mm-hmm. That's voter suppression. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But people won't call it that. They'll call it, they say, oh, this is what we do. No. Let's be clear about it.
Intimidation.
It is intimidation
because
too.
No one, even if they even make a complaint, it's not addressed. It's
That's right.
Brushed under the rug.
That's
so
right.
It's just a trickle down effect.
So you look at that and you say, well, because it's voters, we know it's voter intimidation. So now the next person who might be a brilliant person, who might have something to offer the community, says, yeah, I'm not going to be bothered because I don't want to deal with that. See, that's a voter suppression. Voter intimidation.
I was reading your book that we have not put out yet, right?
We got to work here. We're going to get this done.
But I was going through it yesterday, and I was just like, I'm like, okay, let me just go through certain things. And I end up, it just reads like a novel. And I'm like, no, that's not what you're here for. Stop reading, right? And then I would go and look around and I'm reading again and I'm all over the place. And it's really good, right? Mm-hmm. And we were talking about your dad. Mm-hmm. In one chapter, we talked about your dad. And the chapter starts off with the poem. It's pause, and I can't remember, but it's just about the new, like the old leaving and the new coming over. But the old has to make way for them, has to accept them and not reject them. Yeah. And I was thinking about Gail, because Gail's running again for Central Ward Council person. Gail, Phil Jenkins. Mm-hmm. So when I saw that she was running again, I was like, they need someone in there who has an understanding of how to govern this city. Right. right? Because we need people that know what they're doing to teach the people that's coming in here. And we need them to teach them the right way. You guide them. You got to teach them, but still guide them and do it in a way where we are not trying to create a narrative for them and how they function, how they decide they want to govern going forward. Because that happens a lot. You bring somebody in, and then you just create a clone of yourself. So now we have the same consistent thing throughout.
Yeah. So
what do you think about Gail running? Because you were so strong supporter of Gail.
So I think everybody has a right to run. And I think that the residents deserve the best, right? What I look for, this is me. I ask, where's the mentorship? Right? Where are the young people? When I look at the folks who are running and the years that they've served, I just ask, like, where's the fruit of that? Like, where's the 25-year-old that was mentored who can step up and run? That's, so, I mean, that's it. And so, I understand Gail has been in office and that she has a lot of institutional knowledge. But I don't think that it's sustainable for us to not pass that institutional knowledge down so that other people could run, right? And so, yeah. But,
I don't know. These are my assumptions and what I thought by listening to her, and I went to her fundraiser, birthday party, and she was saying everything that I thought. It's like the lack of knowledge, the lack of, if we don't, being a politician is more than just a title, right? This is a business. Like you said, you got to know how to run this city. This city is a business. It operates that way. And then there's check and balances. So for the most part, a councilman's part is check and balances.
So listen, so if we really have the conversation, right, about the role of a council person, the role of a council person is to legislate. They vote on ordinances, they vote on budgets. And then the mayor then takes the money from the budget and uses it, right? So the council says, we're going to allocate this money for this. And then the mayor's, got it. That's why in the mayor's office, you have all of those different departments that are now using the money to do based on what the council said. And that's it. So these are the kinds of things. Part of this conversation is why people look and go, err. So I always ask this question. The council in the city of Newark, part-time jobs. They're not full-time jobs.
But aren't all council people?
No, but hear what I'm saying.
Okay.
Part-time. Right? But the council makes over $100,000 a year. Part-time. Wait a minute. And the council has 5 staff. And the council president has 6. For a part-time job. Part-time job. Go through the state of New Jersey and look at every other city. Now, the council in Newark, they all drive cars. They all have cars. Do you know the history? Wait a minute. City car. Do you know the history of the car? I want to give you the history of the car. Somebody told me this, and I laughed. Actually, it was Sharp James, former Mayor James. I had him on a radio show. Earl Harris, late Earl Harris, who was a councilman, didn't have a car of his own when he became councilman. The council didn't have cars. All the council people had their own cars. And so Earl Harris said, we should all have cars. And so they voted on it. And since then they've had cars. And the city the constituents just go along with it now. So it's filled up. The gas tanks of these cars are filled up on city dollars. The maintenance of these cars are paid for with city dollars. They're upgraded with city dollars. And it was all at the whim of a guy who didn't have his own personal car. And so,
that's like a budget there.
all of it. If you look at, so if you say 5 staff members for council,
order repairs, they don't got to do nothing.
if the average salary for an aide, council aide, is say $55,000, and you got 5 of them, it's $250,000. Then you take the council person's salary, which is over $100,000. That's $350,000, $360,000 per council person. And I'm telling you with the council person's job. So council people have full-time jobs. They got 8-hour jobs. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if they can have an 8-hour job, that means that the job that they have there doesn't require them to be there for that long. They choose to do like constituent things. They go to, so the late Mildred Crump would have her senior citizen fashion show, and they would go to and do these things. But those things are not, no. That shouldn't be something that you're paid to do. You decide you want to go do that. The business is to vote on budgets and to legislate and to vote on ordinances, pass ordinances. That's it.
And interact with your ward, the residents, right? So how is interaction?
So wait a minute, no. So but I'm gonna ask you this.
Because you
so
go to the residents, right?
Go to Westfield. You tell me. You understand what I'm saying? The council people in Westfield, they don't.
How do you know what your community wants? How do you know what they're complaining? If you're not in the midst of the community.
But what I'm saying to you is this: I believe that the relationship that the council has with the constituent is almost like the relationship that an over pampering parent has with their child. So the child never grows up and becomes independent. And so as a result, they continue to rely on them. You see, that reliance is what keeps that council person in their seat, because you never allow the community to grow up and become independent. Mm-hmm. Are you following?
And then half the time, if there's, and no offense, but I'm a voter, half the time it's just coming and pat somebody on the back and hear a complaint. You don't even do nothing about the complaint.
Right.
You know,
because they can't.
There are times.
But understand, because they can't.
So I know it to get out of hand. A party is like, you get to come to my party every year, eat for free and dance.
But they can't do most of the things they say they're going to do. They cannot do. They can't do it. They can't do it.
They don't have.
But it sounds good. It makes me feel good as a constituent, right? Mm-hmm. To know that you want to do it.
And that you listen.
And that you listen. Right.
Advocate on my behalf. But at the end of the day,
and how do I know they can't do it? Because I've been in some of
the... No, they don't. But they should say that.
Not only
Sometimes
that,
people should lead with that.
But you know they can't do it because I've been in rooms where they say, and they complain about this, that, and the other. I hear the council people. I've been in those rooms too, where they say, man, they ain't we're asking me to do this, that. You have constituents come down to the council, go to a council with an electric bill because they can't pay their electric bill. Now, I'm not getting on the person who can't pay their electric bill. Everybody had a hard time.
Why are you in City Hall?
Why are you in City Hall? Because you can't. Because you've been trained, you've been conditioned generationally to believe that you could go there, and that because your council person is going to give you 20 minutes of their time, it makes you feel important.
Yeah, but that's ridiculous. That's what I mean when I say that when there are things that can't be delivered on, then those things, the best way to help somebody is by giving them the resources or pointing them in the right direction.
So I'm gonna tell you a story, right? And my brother might get upset with me if he sees this as my tells him, but it happened, so it's public record. When he was councilman, he was working on building, like he was focused on education. Right? That was his thing. Like, educate him, teach him how to fish. Don't give him fish. And so there was an article that came out and talked about this $100 million grant or $100 million something to build this institution, Central War. And he gave a speech at Science Park. And there were people who said, I don't give a damn about that building. I don't give a damn about that. We hungry. And he made a comment, which was a true comment. And he talked about people suffering from arrested development. And I believe that that was the match that led to kindling that led to him ultimately struggling for re-election. Because people don't want to hear that they're responsible for their own. You understand what I'm saying? So what he was saying was, no, I understand you're hungry, but I'm not going to give you food. I'm going to teach you how to hunt. He said, oh, that, I don't want to do that.
But that's like you said earlier about keeping the people in poverty.
It works. It's a winning formula. Come on. It's a winning formula. But it's the biggest joke, too, within the political circle, where they say, I don't know if you ever heard this saying, but in the political circles, they say, if you feed them, you can lead them. If they swallow, they will follow. And they laugh about this in these political circles. So, but look at it. Every single time, what do you see? You see the politicians go out and they're handing out turkeys, they hand out chicken, they hand out dinners, they hand out this, they hand out. How many ever hear ask their constituents to do some introspective work? Why are you in this condition? What did you do? What role did you play? Here is the hustle. Know why you're in that condition, Dawn? And this is why I'm here to fight for you. Because such and such. You know how much mail I've been getting about how these gubernatorial candidates gonna fight Donald Trump? How the council people gonna fight Donald Trump? How the board members are gonna fight Donald Trump? Like everybody. But it ain't about Donald Trump. Right? The question is, the honest conversation with the voter is, how'd you allow your community to get like this? How'd you allow your board to get like this? How did you allow your street to look filthy? What didn't you do that you should do? But see, you won't get votes like that.
But I don't think they tried it yet.
No,
they try it, they might see.
No, you've had a couple people try it.
You think?
Oh yeah, I'll tell you. You know who tried it once? Go back to 2014. Shavar Jeffrey tried it.
Did he?
Oh yeah, listen to some of those debates. Shavar Jeffries was holding people accountable in the audience for their behavior, for their this, for their that, for their whatever. That's they didn't want to hear that. So for me, the politician could be more honest about, like, yeah, I can't fix that. What I can do is work on making sure that money that comes in gets allocated to fixing potholes, some infrastructural things, right? But I can't fix the stuff that's going on in your house that's spilling out into the community that is infecting people. I can't do anything about that. But because the neighbors want that resolved, that becomes a campaign point on a piece of literature.
Yeah.
Right. But I can't stop.
But ain't nothing you can do about it.
Nothing I can do about it.
Nothing.
And so the struggle, right, is how to keep people living in a community. And my uncle says it's not a community, neighborhood, but keep people living in neighborhoods where that kind of exists. And what typically happens is people who have the means to move. And then the property value goes down, right? And then people who could afford to live there, but they're like-minded with the other people, and the infection spreads more, right? That's what happens. And then ultimately, right, even if you bought the house here, you're looking, right? And then that next house gets infected, the following house gets infected, the following house gets infected. And at some point you say, yo, before we lose everything, we're going to move. Gotta go. Right. And then you go, and then the house that you once owned, come back 2-3 years later, it's infected.
Now, I have been very vocal about housing, right? I work in housing now. And I see that all of our cities are building up a lot of market rate housing. And they're doing that in an effort. It's private, whatever. Probably people making money, but they building things that residents cannot afford to live in. So now you're displacing people. And I always said, where are they going? Where are they going? Where are they going? And as bad as I don't want to be in the midst of as much as I don't want to be in the midst of these things, I don't want people to not have nowhere to live. Like, we don't have to look people in a spot or keep them. It's like you're pushing them. I don't know where they're pushing them to, because I haven't seen this ghetto they creating yet, but it got to be somewhere, because you can't just put them nowhere. So when you're pushing all this into the area.
So it's people want change without, they want change. See, whenever things change, right? It's uncomfortable because we're creatures of habit. So change is scary. Change is uncomfortable. Change is different. And you can't have people who, I don't think, be real careful with this, but people who don't have the means to live in, whatever market rate housing is, to simply say, I'm going to keep this neighborhood. It's going to be a race to the bottom as opposed to a race to the top. So we're going to do everything we can to keep this neighborhood just like it is, because these people don't have some place to go. I say, why not create the opportunity for the people, right? Be genuine about creating an opportunity. See, that requires now electing people, but being smart about the people you elect, who are about creating the opportunities to uplift those people so that they can extricate themselves from their current circumstances. Now, I say all that, and I say also, because a lot of that sounds like rugged individualism, right? It's like, I'm going to give you some boots and you can pick yourself up by your own bootstraps and you can get yourself together. But we got to go back through so it's complicated. Because now you got to go back through decades and decades of trauma that these people have undergone. And there ushers in the conversation about reparations, right? How to repair people who have already been traumatized and damaged. We can't just put them here as though none of that occurred and said, we're going to give you some resources. You should go out there and you should be able to make a way for yourself. No, you got to pay attention. So my point is that there's real work that has to be done. Meanwhile, you've got a lot of politicians who are just on the hustle game. And then you got a lot of people in the community that are just on the government dole. Just give me a job, right? And so you got all those dynamics going on. And meanwhile, we're losing, like you said. And so at some point, there just has to be a radical end to it. But you got people playing on all sides, right? Hustling and playing on all sides. That it's difficult for the people who are in the middle, who are drowning, sometimes to even find out where the shoreline is, to be able to grab hold, right? So there's a lot. And then every now and again, you get an activist who's speaking truth to power and who is trying to make a difference. And if they push the wrong buttons and they agitate the establishment, they get radicalized, demonized, criminalized, and if they keep going, they'll get assassinated. And so you got all these dynamics happening. Dr. King said it. He said, he didn't really see the change that you're talking about occurring because people are not willing to fight hard enough for it. And the people who are in control are not willing to give up enough. And so that's the ultimate dynamic. So yeah, everybody's not going to be saved. And we have to, it's a hard reality, but everybody's not going to be saved. And if people are not fighting urgently enough to save themselves, they may be counted among those who lose. And look, when you're on an airplane, what do they tell you?
So first,
they say, put your mask on first.
You're right, because when you were saying that, I was thinking about like a lot of people that I've come in contact with, a lot of things that I've seen, a lot of stories that I've heard, and I would say that I don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I really don't.
Put your hands up and fight. You got.
Some people just. What are you doing to yourself? Because you got to take accountability. You have to take accountability for this.
Yeah.
And everybody can't be saved. Sad. That makes me sad. Because
it's a fact.
People are about to go through some stuff. It's a struggle out here. Thank God, thank you, Jesus, for keeping me and making me financially sound enough to be able to sustain myself and my family. However, it's a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, it's real struggle. It's about to get bad.
Yeah, but let's go back to these elected officials, right? These faith-based leaders, all these people who, the person who is going to get really, really bad for, instead of them being sat down and told, you got to take some accountability, you got to be responsible. So where they say, oh, you're in the problem you're in because Donald Trump. But that's what they're doing. Do you understand what I'm saying? And before Donald Trump, it was George Bush. Before George Bush, it was this one. Before this one, it was another one. Before that, it was Ronald Reagan. Before that, it was such a... But they never say it's you. And then the elected official never says it is them. Then you never hear any of them say ever that they fail. Ever. And so I want you to understand, we live in a world where not one elected official in all of urban America has failed, according to their own standards. It's somebody else's fault. It's somebody else's fault.
Right. Somebody
else's fault. Even if they did fail, it's because somebody else.
That's why I stopped myself, because we know some that failed, but somebody else's fault.
Somebody else's fault. And so nobody that's right. At the highest level, the pastor, the bishop, the deacon, the imam, none of them take responsibility. And so that trickles down. And so there's zero accountability. If you go, they're formulas though. Right? They're formulas. They're recipes. If you want to make a good German chocolate cake, they're recipes for making a good German chocolate cake. But, Dawn, if you tell me you're making a German chocolate cake and I see you pull some chicken thighs out of the oven and some Saison off your shelf, I'm looking going, that's not going to be a German chocolate cake. Not by any recipe that I've ever seen. Right? And so when these elected officials start saying that they're going to do something, I look at the recipe they're following. And I'm going, yeah, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And I look at, and so when people in the community, when voters say that they want change, and then I look at how they move and how they vote, that's a recipe. And I'm going, it's not going to happen. You look at towns, and granted, there's some other things at play as well. I get it. But if I want my town to look like that town, I look at the elected officials that they have, and I look at the qualifications of those elected officials that they have. And I go, well, I need to get elected officials that have these kinds of qualifications. So you go into some of those towns and you see that the council people, because it's a part-time job, but the council people don't work for city government. They have their own practices, or they work in the private sector somewhere. They work in New York. Then they come home and they conduct this business part-time and they go back to their job. The thing that's buying their house and paying for their kids' college, and it has nothing to do with the city that they're the council person for. They literally are serving the city because they have a house there. Their family lives there. They're rooted there, and they want to make sure they want to maintain the quality of life in their town. That's their only purpose, not to go get a job, not to give somebody a job. See, but when you're elected officials, and the number one job is to get people jobs and to make sure that they have jobs and do whatever, and it's less about the culture of the environment. And so, yeah. So that's where I would look. That's what I look at. I didn't go,
Are you far removed from politics as far as things you did on the show and being local?
Yeah. So I'll have a conversation. Somebody wants to have a conversation with me, but I'm about what's going on, because I think that I was blessed to be around it and to understand it, right? But be liberated enough to not need it. It's a drug. It's like heroin or coke. It's like that to the people who are in these. They tie off and they gotta get back in. I gotta get back in. I can't listen. My dad quit politics and quit working and developed his own business and still worked on the periphery of politics in terms of electing people, stuff like that. But in terms of a job, but the draw to still earn a living based on politics, he didn't shake that. He did that for his whole life.
So I think when you say it's like a drug, that's what I think. I think that if this is how you financially sustain yourself.
Yeah.
If this is your
Gotta
career,
keep coming
gotta
back.
get back in.
Gotta get back in.
the fight.
You don't know nothing else. So I left politics. So my first job out of school was working for City Hall. I was a graphic artist. Sharp, the former mayor, hired me. And it was the way politics are done. He lived down the street.
Your father.
Right? He called me, and now he and my father were beefing.
Oh,
They
really?
beefed a lot. Oh, they beefed
But
a
do you
lot.
think those beefs, even though they was beefing,
Did you read? No. Did you read?
Brothers, but like,
Did you read Sharp James's book? Oh, read his
no,
book.
I did, Sharp. I'm gonna read your book.
Read his book. But my father's in that book. My uncle's in that book.
I know they are.
There's some accountings that are not. There's some accountings that are not true though. Like one where Sharp says that my uncle that I think it says Sharp was pulling down. No, yeah, Sharp was pulling down signs. My father's signs when my father was running for councilman against Sharp. And my brother, my father's brother, my uncle went to, this is Sharp's accounting in his book, that my uncle went to the headquarters and I think Sharp says took a telephone cord and wrapped it around his neck and pulled a gun or a knife out on him and said something about it. That didn't happen. But, you know, but there were some rough and tumbles between them.
Yeah.
A lot of them. But in the middle of that,
Mm-hmm.
Sharp was an amazing dude, right? Because he would still hang out with my brother, would still hang out with me. I would toss a football with him. Like right after their argument in the newspaper between Sharif or Dawson and James, right? And then the mayor, or at that point, the councilman would come outside with football. Eric, let's toss the ball. Football. We go down, hit the tennis ball down to the tennis court. He's an amazing tennis player back then. But when I finished school, he called me. He was on his way to Florida, actually. And he was getting in his car. And that's when they had the car phones. And he said, neighbor, come on down. So I ran down the street. He said, what are you doing with yourself? You finished school? I said, yeah. He said, what are you doing? He said, what'd you go to school for? I said, arts. He said, what are you doing with stuff? I said, I'm looking for a job. He got on his phone and called his secretary. He said, listen, my neighbor is a graphic artist. I'm sending him down there Monday. He's looking for a job. And he hung the phone up. He said, go down there Monday. So I show up Monday with my resume, because that's how I was taught, right? I had my resume printed out, I had all my stuff. I go to handling my resume. She said, what's that? I said, it's my resume. She said, for what? She said, you got the job. Go to 295 Halsey Street. That was my first experience with something like that. Because every place else I went in had to apply for a job. I had to bring a resume and do whatever. I got there. I had my drafting table there, 295 Halsey Street. And I was working. Lee Jack Morton, may rest in peace, was my first art director ever out of school. And there I was. I was a graphic artist for the city of New Orleans. Oh, I was. In fact, and I'm going to say this, and I don't know if any of the folks are still alive that were there when I got there, but the way that they were doing things there was very antiquated when I got there, right? Because I came out of school of visual arts and technology was taken over, right? The Mac had come out, right? I had purchased a Mac computer. It was one of the first ones. And so I paid thousands and thousands of dollars for this computer, which you can get for, that computer doesn't even exist anymore, but it was a black and white computer. It was a Mac SE. It had a monitor this big and it was black and white. But I bought a scanner. Scanners had just come out. A scanner back then, I bought a scanner for $3,000. That's how much a scanner cost back then. Things had just come out. So it was all cutting edge. But when I got into 295 Halsey Street, they were still what they call, they were doing, boards. So they were printing out what was called repro and then waxing it and mounting it on a board and shooting it on a stat camera in order to produce film. Right now, I had learned how to do that years ago. But I'm like, you guys are still making stuff like this? Why didn't you have a scanner? And in fact, one of the guys who worked there spent $20,000 buying a piece of equipment, which I told him, I said, why are you buying this? You could get a scanner and do, And he said, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah.
And he bought this, and that thing never got used.
Mm.
But it got signed off by the guy who was the director of office services at the time. So yeah, I was immensely qualified, but I was not. I was like, there was a lot of pushback against me because the older people, you could see that they felt the change and they felt uncomfortable, which is what I said to you about. Yeah, in the job.
Okay.
Change is uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and they knew they weren't ready to change. They were happy being in the spaces they were in. Showing up at work, things took 4 times as long to get done, but they were okay with it. And nobody in City Hall really, because they figured this is how stuff gets done. And they figure, oh, if this young whippersnapper comes in here, we're going to have to work. Right?
Hey, but it's easier work. It's
No,
not
no.
even work.
But
it's easier.
But learning that process, that's the hard part, right? And that's the hard and the scary part. And they didn't want to do that because now the expectations within City Hall would be greater. Why is it taking 3? It would take 3 days to get a flyer done. I was like, 3 days? Man, I could do that flyer in like an hour. 3 days. It was 3 days. All lunches at Jay's. They walk down to Jay's and have lunch.
What men do, what people do, most people, we talk about our kids. I don't care. We can argue about how's the kid, how's your son? Your son did it. Oh yeah, and then you just talk and brag and sharp problem. It's like, okay, all right, so we gonna put him in this space so it was well deserved. But a lot of people don't do that. Some people put people in spaces that don't belong.
Well, no. So Sharp didn't. Let me not give him that. He didn't do it because I was qualified. He did it because I was a neighbor, and I'm gonna explain to you why. Okay. Because a couple of years later, they had to cut that position. Right. So always cut the art department whenever there's a budget issue. So I get a phone call from the mayor's office while I'm at my desk. He says, "Neighbor," they put the mayor on the phone. He said, "Neighbor, I'm just letting you know, we're going to have to cut that position that you're working at." And I'm like, oh man, child just born. My oldest daughter just born. And so I said, okay, all right. He said, no, but we're going to put you in the BA's office and you can make more money. And I said, but I went to school for graphic arts. I don't know anything about that. I don't want to do that. So I turned that position down. So to your point, if I wasn't a principled person, I'd have taken a job that I wasn't qualified to do, which is what you experience when you deal with government. Most of those people are working there and they are not qualified. But some political person gave them a job. And instead of them being a principled person and saying, you know what, thank you for that, but I'm not qualified, they take the job and they sit there and then they fail you. Understand what I'm saying? And then what I learned when I went into corporate is that creates all kinds of ripple effects. Because imagine the people in that department who are qualified, all of a sudden, there's resentment, there's this, there's that, there's the other thing, right? And then there's protection of me by the mayor. So we can't say nothing to Eric because the mayor's right now. What does that do? Instead of me being humble and maybe learning my job and being able to step up and fill those shoes, right? I walk around the mayor and it creates low morale,
poor performance.
There you go. And that's exactly what you see all throughout government. So I nipped that in the bud because of who I am. And remember what my grandmother said, you belong to me. You represent me. So it wasn't about Eric going to get that job. It was like, I can't go do that job. Then and that's how I've lived my life. And so yes, I turned that job down. And so I went home to my then wife with my newborn and I said, I don't have a job. And I went and found myself a job. I took accountability. You understand what I'm saying? Which we're not taught to do now. I took responsibility. I said it's for me to find a job, not for that man to give me a job that I'm not qualified for. And there lies the biggest challenge. And so, I
wish that would happen today.
but it doesn't, right? And it did, and it didn't happen for the most part back then either. It happened with a few, because I know like all of the council people who worked there, their kids worked in their offices. That was my age. And I knew they weren't qualified to do those jobs.
When you put someone in a space who's not qualified and they have the wherewithal to excel in that space, much respect to them, right?
Yeah.
You capitalized off the opportunity. But when you can, and when you see that they can, and you continue to
You have
keep
to
them
remove
there,
them.
you really need to remove
Yes.
them. You have to be the responsible person to remove them from
But they
that
don't.
space.
But they don't.
That's where the problem comes, because the problem is not giving somebody an opportunity. The problem is not. The problem is when you realize that they're not rising to the opportunity.
I always ask the question, is this the best we got? See, so with any elected official, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're entitled to the best that's out there. But the environment does not encourage the best to run. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So we don't get the best. And I always challenge the field of candidates that are there. Is this the best? Is this the best? See, because like I said, don't pull chicken and says on out and tell me you making German chocolate cake. See, because that's what you're telling the residents.
Yeah.
And the residents buy into that nonsense too, right? They say, yeah, that's what we're doing. Yeah, we're going to do. And they know. They know. So my thing is now, I focus on what I know can be done as opposed to having somebody tell me some falsehoods about what things are, right? So I look at it, I make that assessment, I put my energy where it can best be used to further, my agenda, which is to put my mask on for, right? To make sure that, my immediate family and then my extended family are protected and have what they need to go. So, like I said, I'm heading down to Howard next Thursday to witness Lucy Emma Dawson graduate. And that's it. My grandson, my daughter came to the soft opening. My daughter, she cried. She looked and she said, Pop, I'm talking to Jordan about, Emma Dawson. Like all he sees is a label on a pie, right? And I told him, I said, no, dude. I said, just like somebody who's looking at Entenmann's or some other company, and then somebody in some room is telling this kid who's 12 years old that his great-great-grandfather started that business or did whatever. I said, you're in the midst of that right now. I said, this is your great-grandmother's recipe. I said, so when people come in here and say, oh, Grandma Emma's, I had that. Give me a bean pie or sweet potato pie or this, that. It's your grandmother's, your great-great-grandmother's name that's on this. Mm-hmm. I said, you are standing in a space right now. And so as I'm talking to him, I look over at her and tears are just pouring down her face. See, that's where I am. So the whole political thing, they can't do that for me. They can't do that for him. They can't do that because they don't have a mind to want to. Their mind is to want to continue a hustle on a community that doesn't know better or doesn't want to do better. One of the two. Because most of the people who want better, they just leave the community. They go someplace else. You understand what I'm saying? Like that's what happens. Those other people leave.
You're right. I sure ran too.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't have to run.
You shouldn't. But you you get overwhelmed. You get overwhelmed. I mean, listen, I had a buddy who moved downtown lives in the Shack building. I have friends who live in the building over there by NJ Pack too, right? And I have people who live in the Old Haynes building, right? But all of them, those are all communities unto themselves. Those people don't walk down Broad Street. They don't go hang out. They don't do anything in the area. They go home. They come out of that building. They go to work or do whatever they do. If they want to go hang out, they hang out in New York. They're in Hoboken. They hang out in Jersey City. And then they come back and they park their cars and they go up to their apartments. Like it's.
And I hope that they can enjoy.
Go downtown at 6 o'clock at night. Look at what it looks like.
No, I don't want to.
There you go. But if you go down there, it's barren. All the gates are pulled down.
But it seems like, and I haven't been down there at night. No, I'm not afraid to go down there at night. Not downtown Newark. I think that downtown Newark is one of the most protected areas in the city. It has changed so much.
You got open air drugs on Market, Z.
That's how much I go down there. I was trying to get the benefit of the doubt. I went down there for lunch once. It was a minute ago. I just don't have any business that way. Yeah. But I went to meet somebody for lunch, and I sat. It was Caucasians jogging.
Which part?
They was riding bikes. I was right across the street from Military Park.
Oh, so you know what they call? Somebody said they call that.
Yeah, they were walking dogs.
What do they call that? North of Market. Eating. They call it north of. They call it. Is it north of Market? Is that what they call it?
I don't know, but they
I think that's what they call it. So almost like you got Soho and Dumbo in New York. I think they're trying to call that north of Market. So. They are. So they're building the Avalon. I think it's at the Avalon building or whatever it is. The luxury building over with down from the colonnades over. It's on Broad and Broadway. Yep. Almost where the Burger King is over there. Yeah. Right. So they got all those condos that they're building there. And so yeah, you will have at some point almost right. They're gonna come and so like I said, consider them to be the white blood cells that are coming to take care of the infection. You understand what I'm saying?
Where that infection gonna travel to?
Oh, listen, it's gotta go someplace. But it's going right. But the white blood cells are coming, and I don't mean to identify them with white people, because it could be any group of people, right? But they're coming to clear up the infection. Same thing at 440. The towers. Paramount Towers. On Elizabeth Avenue.
I just saw that recently. Somebody put it on TikTok. I said, whoa.
Listen. I remember
prime real estate.
When I first moved, because when my parents divorced, my mom moved us to Compton. So I lived in Compton, California for a little while. And when I came back here and we were up on Leslie Street, right off of Chancellor Avenue, it was right after the uprising, right? So Chancellor Avenue was still beautiful. I remember Bergen Street used to have a furrier on Bergen Street, right? There used to be a Bergen sporting goods store. There's a sporting goods shop, all black owned because the white community was just abandoning a lot of stuff. But up on Chancellor Avenue, it was bustling community. Beautiful. Everything black on black businesses. Well, except once you got over the bridge over where 78 is now, you crossed over where Valley Fair is. On the right hand side used to be a bagel spot that my father used to send us up to get the bagels.
Spot you were talking about.
Yeah, man, get those hot bagels. And so Weequahic Towers or Carmel Towers was the spot to live in. It's like luxury living.
View.
No, have you been in those apartments?
Heck no.
Those apartments.
Before, no.
No. But the footprint of those apartments, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I can imagine.
Right?
The building itself is.
And Weequahic Park, when I was a kid, it was beautiful. They had horse racing in the park, the lake. They had speed boats in the lake. It was absolutely beautiful. And so I would always look at that. My father and I would talk about the fact that Weequahic Park, that the infrastructure is still there. Right? It's just that you just have to get different people in and all of a sudden it'll change. Well, now that's happening, right? That building is going to usher in some more white blood cells. You understand what I'm saying? Because those people are going to use that park. And trust me, law enforcement is going to make sure that those people feel safe using that park.
That's what they did downtown. They created a safe space for them. You cannot have market rate rents. You cannot have the rents that freaking high and not provide a safe space.
Well, those people in the building, I'm telling you, because I know those people in that building over there by Robert Tree Pack were calling City Hall, saying, "Listen, we see vagrants out there. Y'all need to deal with that. Oh, we see such and such. Y'all need to deal with that."
Because you know what's going to happen? What's going to happen is when they stop securing and providing and responding to them, they moving the heck out, and that building gonna turn into a whole ghetto again. Because you're not gonna leave it empty, and it's private owned. They want money. They don't give a damn. They don't care where they get this money from.
But those private owners have money to be able to go down and to pay politicians in terms of donating to their campaigns to ensure that their needs are met. You understand? Different, right? So they have, each of those owners have become lobbyists to the politicians down at 920 Broad Street. That's the difference. See, these neighborhoods are not lobbyists. They don't tell the politicians, but politicians tell them what they're going to get. Different. Different. But if you had real communities and those communities got together and said, hey, listen, you know what? These 7 blocks are going to come together. We're going to pick a candidate. We're going to pool our money together and we're going to run a candidate. It'll be different. Different. But what happens is these 9 blocks, they wait for a candidate to emerge, and then that candidate now tells them what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. So different. Those building owners are not waiting for politicians. They're picking politicians. So you got areas. You got, again, I'm telling you. And I'm wondering what they're going to do with 550. That blue building. Coming up coming up Elizabeth Avenue. That's a city-owned building. That's low income housing in that building. Coming up from Meeker, on the right-hand side, that light blue building. Yes. It was horrible too. When I used to my civic association used to get food from Trader Joe's, like food that was 2, maybe 3 days, 4 days from being expired. Trader Joe's had to take it off the shelf. Instead of throwing it away, I say, hey, give it to me. I had a van. I want to get back to this at some point too. I had a van, and I had filet mignon. I had whole chickens. I had turkey breast. I had other kinds of steaks, lamb chops, all this stuff, all these meats and then vegetables and things loaded into the van. And I would go to like 550, or I go down to Washington Street, 440 Washington Street. I'd be at the senior buildings in East Orange and Orange, giving this food away, like tons of food. And so one day I was giving food out in 550, and I went there. I said, oh my God, this is horrible. People are living in horrible conditions. I mean, bad. When I say bad, roach infested, mouse infested, rat infested, horrible, mold. Anyway, and then you got drug trade going up there. That's why you got the police sitting up in that area. But those people 2 blocks away in Carmel Towers are not going to tolerate that. That's going to have to move. Yes.
Sad. It's sad to know that we still in a space where people can live, but people are in those conditions and nothing's being done about it. Nobody's being held accountable. The city's not doing nothing to get those buildings fixed. How do you allow, I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant. It just disturbs me.
Yeah.
It disturbs me because there's a check and balance everywhere. Who's inspecting this property and who's saying that this is okay and who's not allowing it? You could vacate this building. Get these people out of here. Put them somewhere else.
So you have 24 hours in the day, right? And they have 24 hours in the day. And they prioritize. And so by the end of the day, your call didn't get answered because you were not prioritized in that list of people. And then the next day goes, and there's a priority list of people to call and respond to. And then there's another one. And the people, unfortunately, who fall at the very bottom of those priority lists, people like the ones who live in 5.
Yeah, that's sad. That's sad. That's why you keep money going.
Yeah, but that's great.
And that disturbs my spirit when I think about it. So I gotta let that go.
But that's why, and so but those kinds of, so you can control what you can control, right? Understand what you understand to be truth, and then navigate your life accordingly. And so that's the space I'm living in now. And so I got this institutional knowledge about how things run and why things are going where they're going. And I listen to the fiction, right? And, I look at the end of the day, I say, did I do the best I could, to build my ark for my family and my friends. And if I did that, then I feel good, I feel like I accomplished something. The rest, I can't, I won't be guilted. And I used to feel guilt, but I don't allow myself. My therapist at Sloan, she used to tell me, be kind to yourself. And I've learned to do that, right? And so I don't allow myself to be guilted into having to take responsibility for people who be accountable for their own action. I won't allow myself to do that and won't beat myself up like that.
Are you going to finish your book?
I am. I got a lot of stuff, like there really is a lot of stuff. Man, geez, a lot. There's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about mental health. I want to talk about, physical health.
You have so many layers.
Yeah. I want to talk about a little bit more about politics.
What do you think your dad, you speak very highly of your dad too, and your grandma, especially when you talk legacy, you talk your grandma. So what about your dad? What would your dad think about you right now in this moment?
I think that, I would like to think that he would be, this is interesting, right? Because it's funny, right? Because I think my vitriol, like the initial response was, I think he'd be proud. I gotta tell you, I don't know, and I don't know whether it was just his upbringing or the way that he had to move through life and do whatever. The way that I exhibit pride for my children isn't like wasn't his way, right? So I'm using the word proud, but it's probably a different word. But I think that I gotta think about that, Dawn. That's a great question, and I'm probably gonna want to call them on my siblings too tonight to find because I don't know. Because I admired my dad.
You live with your dad. Your dad raised you.
I lived with him for a little while, right? Yeah. But I attribute most of who I am. Well, that's even difficult because they're big pieces of me that I can see my father in, right? But I temper that part of me by what my mother poured into me, right? Because if the part of me that my mother poured in me didn't exist, it would be the imbalance would be such that I couldn't thrive. But my mother's tempering of the part of me that is my dad allows me to be a better version of myself. And then my grandmother, and then my better version of my, I don't know. Maybe. But my grandmother, I gotta go back to my grandmother. And she just takes all of that I just talked about, and she just layered this enormous amount of humanity and love and tenderness and kindness and wisdom and all these other things that I'm benefiting from now. Right? But yeah, my dad was a very interesting guy. A very, very interesting guy. I'm grateful, 100% grateful for him. But words like proud, I don't know. My dad never came to a football game that I played in. Never came to a wrestling match that I participated in. I had trophies, I had awards, I had all kinds of stuff. He's never had any, And so it's hard for me, proud is looking out in the audience and seeing that person who's cheering you on, things like that, right? I can't tell you that I ever felt my dad cheering me on, if that makes sense. I never, my mom, proud, 100% proud. My mom coming to school, batting for me 100%, got my back about everything, literally. And until she died, would tell stories, would regale you if you were here about the time she would go to school and have my back about. So I can't tell you a time that my dad, and he's president of Board of Education, can't tell you a time that he came to school to have my back.
Did he push you? Did he push you as far as your education and?
Yeah, so he did.
Provide for you?
No, absolutely. So that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying there's another word for it, right? I think, and I started by saying maybe because of how he viewed having to raise me. I can only speak for myself. The way that I interpret what he did was necessary,
So you
right?
think he
Necessary
did
parenting,
beyond
right?
that?
But not, well, yeah, no, I mean, I mean, because,
You don't think he could? I'm just asking.
no,
Like
but
when you
it's
when you
and
give
I
your
try to be
definition.
honest, right? Like,
Yeah,
so
you are.
I could say, oh yeah, no, he was
So do you think are you
my
looking
dad wasn't
when you say
cuddling.
proud?
My dad wasn't affectionate. Wasn't
In your dad's definition of proud, not in your definition of what proud is,
and his definition
but
of
in your
proud.
dad's
If I looked at what he,
definition.
I would say yes. Then I would say yes. I would say
Look
that
at
if he
you
were,
from your
I would
dad's
say if he
point of
were
view.
in rooms talking about me to other people,
Yes,
they would say he was proud.
but you would.
But if he were in a room with me, would I feel that? No.
Okay, so from your dad, and even if you gotta close your eyes for a minute, if your dad right now sitting there looking at his son, because
No, talking to
yeah.
you about his son.
Okay,
See, that's
talking
different.
to me. He's
Yes.
up there,
There
he's
you
having
go.
a conversation.
Talking to you about
Talking to
me.
me, and he's saying, you know what? That's my son.
Yes, he would do that. He would absolutely do that. He would absolutely do that. Yes, he would do that. But if I were in a room with you, I can't tell you that I can't be as certain.
Okay, that's okay.
Right?
I get
And
that
so,
part, but as long
but
as
yes,
you know,
but yes, because there are people who I've come in contact with who, who tell me, oh, your father always talked about you. But was he proud? Probably.
I'm sure he was.
Did he make me feel like he was proud? No.
No. Okay.
Right? So different, right?
That's a big
difference. And so, so it took time for me to try to give you that, like the answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so was he proud? Yes. So that's two questions, right? Two different questions.
Yes.
Was he proud? I gotta say probably still. But yeah, I was thinking, I guess I was conflating it and thinking about whether I felt that.
How did you even end up coming back here? Because you moved away and then came and moved back to Newark. How did you get back here?
My father. So, yeah, so I was living in Berkeley. I was living in a big house with about 1.5 acres of land, and my kids were doing what they were doing, and I was working in corporate America, had great jobs, great career. And my dad, it first started in '97 when Cory Booker came down from Harrington Park, and my dad asked me to walk around the block with Cory Booker because Cory wanted to run for council. Mm-hmm. My father said, "Son, I want you to walk him around the block. We were at the house on Wilbur Avenue." He said, "And come back and let me know what you think about it." And I gave an honest assessment of Cory, my assessment. And I told my father I couldn't work on his election because of what I thought about him. And so I didn't. And then at the end of the election, like the last day, I'm in my office. I was vice president? I was vice president, creative director for this publishing company in Saddlebrook. And my father calls me and says, "Son, I really need you. I don't trust anybody else to do this. It's election day. I need to get these doors knocked on. And, could you do that?" So I packed my stuff up and I said, if my father called me like that, I need to show up. So, but during the entire election, I was nowhere around. And so I went there and I did that for him. Cory became councilman in Central Ward. I went back. I stayed in corporate. So I did that one thing, and I back. My father ran a campaign for Cory for mayor. It was unsuccessful. Sharp James won. And then the following election, Cory won. And then my dad asked me to come work with him for a consulting firm that my brother started with the help of my dad to provide communication services for the city of Newark. But I had, in order to secure the, like there was an RFP that was sent out, right? And the qualifications that I had, as a creative director and working at Space, having me on the application, created a better opportunity to get the contract. So I did that, and I came back and I worked with my dad, side by side with my brother and my dad consulting us and trying to do good work for the city of Newark. That was a whole nother trip. Oh my gosh. But, did that for a few years and then went back into corporate America. And then I stayed there, and then, but while I was, but even when I went back into corporate, I was still doing Newark Citizen, and I think I might have just started doing a radio show. Oh, no. So the radio show actually got started. My dad got sick. And I wanted him, there's one episode of him, he did a show. Oh. I started using Blog Talk Radio and was doing a show with him. I said, Dad, you should do a radio show. You would be fantastic. And, you could do, but he had this incessant cough. And so he tried to do the show, did it one time. And then after that one time, he got ill and just never did it again. And then after he passed away in 2015, I just started doing the show. And it just kind of opened up for me to do, because I didn't have my dad's political baggage to sort through.
I was about to ask you that.
Right. So he had whatever and I don't know, right? But I'm going to say this. Anybody who's in that political space and is successful, right, to any degree, they have to make compromises, right? I'm not naive about that. And so I don't know what, if any, they were, but had I done a radio show and he was alive, he would have been the spotlight of that, even though I was doing a show. What about your father? What did your father do? And I'm sitting there trying to defend my father while he's trying to do his business, right?
Would you have defended him?
Well, I would. You know what? I think I would. It would have been. I think so. I think my father would have said, "Talk about the things you need to talk about, son." I think he would have done that. I think he would have freed me to do that, right? Because there's some things, like, I only know what I know, right? So some things I don't know, and so I can't talk about things I don't know. But things I do know, there's nothing. I could say I might have done some things differently, but I can't say that anything that he did was illegal or inappropriate or anything. I just would have strategically done them differently, right? And so I probably would have navigated those conversations in a way not to be disrespectful to him, maybe share some of my views about some stuff. But again, that would have all been a distraction, because it would have always been, well, what would your father do? How would you? And so trying to do a show would have been challenging, right? But like I said, one door closes, another opens. So the door closing was my father dying. And the door that opened was it freed me to be able to have conversations. And in the beginning of the show, people were doing that. Well, your father did. My father's not here. That's all I could. It ended it, right? And then I could just keep talking. And somebody was, and well, my father's not here. Well, your father did. So I said, well, okay, well, take it up with him. And anyway, on to it, right? And I was able to keep moving on to the thing, and then I realized that, wow. But again, remember I was saying to you that I always try to give blessings that were intended to me, to other people. So even that, when I found this idea of doing this blog talk radio, that me doing it, I was like, Dad, you do it. And it was meant for me.
Do you remember what he spoke about the first time? I want to know if he was he being transparent?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, it was a great show.
Okay. Did it influence how you did yours?
No. I did it because I could do my show free of, because I didn't have any impediments. I didn't have any political contracts. I wasn't dealing with any, I didn't have any of that stuff.
Do you think that your dad would have spoken like freely at that point, do you think he would have just said, you know what, fuck it, I'm going for it, what I got to lose? Or do you think he would have still been reserved?
Um, well, it depends, right? Depends on what his strategy was. But it was a very, very good show. My father talked on that show. He talked a lot about the port and other resources in Newark that, like, my father had a wealth of information and knowledge because he was there at the beginning of the emergence of power in the Black and brown community. So Anisio was mayor, right? And so during the Black and brown convention, riots, a whole uprising, a whole bit, my father was right at the core of that and deciding who was going to run for mayor, who was going to run for council, like, Black and brown community sitting down and actually organizing and deciding how they were going to fight against the white power structure in Newark. He was right there. And so everything that was built from the ground up, from Black and brown power taking over, my father knew about. My father was, part of the Nation of Islam, Mosque 25B on Bergen Street. So that was like, that's historic, right? I was down there. I had my bow tie on with my hair cut, with my part of my hair selling Muhammad Speaks, and all of that. I come from that era of having to, write letters to Chicago to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to get a name change, and that history is all the way back there. So.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have a legacy that you have done proud.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. Well, I'm happy to hear you say that he is telling whoever said that to him how proud he is.
Yeah.
And we know your grandmother is just.
Listen, so that's what, my father did. I think I think they all did what they needed to do, but I think my mother and my grandmother did extra. They did a lot of extra. And I'm grateful. All the soft parts of me are my mother and my grandma. And then the rest of me is a mixture of everybody.
Well, it's a great mixture. It's equal parts. It's as good as the pie and the cobblers. You know how to get your measurements right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I really, really appreciate you coming here and talking to me.
Anytime.
It has been a pleasure.
But we're gonna do this book because it's gotta get done. It's gotta get done. And then listen, I think my hope is that it inspires, right? And that it educates and it spreads love and joy. So that would be the goal of the book. I'm at the back 9 of my life. What contributions can I make now so that my grandchildren will feast from a tree that I planted the seed of, right? So I got to get out of thinking that I'm going to plant this seed and I'm going to eat the fruit and say, no, my job now, right? Because I'm in the back 9 is to just plant the seed and to just water the seed, right? Because I know that I'm never going to eat from it. But I know that if I go out there and diligently take care of this, it'll sustain not only my grandchildren, but my great grandchildren.